This sickness will never go away, but welcome back to another brand new episode of Two Please. I'm your host, Abhin.
And I'm your co-host Rohit. You look sleep deprived.
I have allergies, it's allergy season, which is why I look the way I do.
Not just sleep deprived, you look more like recently heartbroken, been crying yourself to sleep every night types.
Very, very in line with today's topic, so to speak, right?
Which
Broken-hearted
is,
men, which is the death of the erotic thriller. This is a subject I have long since wanted to discuss. Rohit affectionately calls them Turkey movies because
yeah,
he's like, I don't, I find these movies to be very strange. But I have always held some sort of weird fascination for them, and there's been so much talk about sex in movies, especially just after Honora having won Best Picture. There's been a huge amount of discourse about how it portrays sex in a particular way, this, that, And I thought, hey, it's time we revisited that topic of the erotic thriller because I think as a genre, it's completely died when it was really everywhere growing up and even a couple of years before us, right? So I went and did a bit of digging. I some of the movies on this list or on this episode are some of my all-time favorite films. So it only seemed right that we did this episode. So a bit of a warning when we before we get into this episode. It's going to be little adult today, right? So just brace yourself. This isn't one for
full
kids.
penetration.
Okay, that's basically one 50 seconds in. There we go. And also, I'm recording this in the study, so I'm going to start sweating in a couple of minutes. Very in line with one of the films we're going to be discussing. But enough rambling from me. This is the episode on the death of the erotic thriller. Let's start the show. Today is not going to be one of those three movies for Rohit, three movies for me kind of episode. It's going to be a little more free flowing than that. We'll start right at the origins of how this genre began, and we'll like trace its way up into modern day. And we'll split the episode into two sections. So the first section will deal with the origins of the genre, its impact on Hollywood and just generally the kind of films that came out of it. And the second half of this episode, we'll sit and dissect the Indian aspect of it because we erotic thrillers in Bollywood had a huge rise in the mid 2000s, and there was particular reasons behind that, and there's a bit of a lasting impact it's had since. So let's start there. That's essentially what the blueprint for this episode is going to be like. According to you, what makes an erotic thriller? Like what is the what are the core ingredients that go into a film like this?
Sorry, I'm just laughing because there are so many directions I could go with this answer, right?
I
You
know.
have been so
I
brave to
know.
lob this question to me. I'm going to be a gentleman and not go for the more risque answer, but an erotic thriller is classified. Obviously, the heart of the plot point is driven by some sort of psychosexual dynamic, right? And I specifically said psychosexual and not just sexual because there are some sexual mind games usually at play, right? There is somebody has an upper hand. I mean, if there's a couple at the center of it, somebody has an upper hand over the other, and they're using that. There's some degree of manipulation, some subterfuge, somebody trying to get away with some sort of crime, and usually the other person in this dynamic is the person in charge of uncovering this crime, right? At least the best movies in this genre have that sort of dynamic at its center, and it's usually the protagonist wrestling. Uh, how do I put it? Right? It's essentially a battle between their mental faculties and their nether regions, right? It's that push pull
Essentially,
of
yeah.
yeah, it's that push pull of hey, what is the right thing to do versus what do I want to do in this moment. And of course, there is the some skin show, and then there's some uh, either simulated or unsimulated sex scene in the
Hmm.
film, stuff like that, right? So there's something in it for everyone. If you want to just go into the theater with a bottle of lotion and tissues, you can do that. you want to go in and try and analyze how the human mind wrestles with these sort of conundrums, sure, you can get that out of the films.
To kind of boil down all of that into like this, into three separate entities, right? I think it you have there are three things common to most erotic thrillers, at least to most 90% of them. There's a plot point, there's some sort of inconvenience, there's a femme fatale character who just drips sexiness, you know, is dangerous, this, that. And there is, in a sense, the good guy, the fall guy, who is enraptured by her and by her magnetism. He just wants every part of her. And in some cases, it's a woman, it could be a woman as well. And let's say in the case of 1996 is Bound. It's essentially one person trying to get the other person to do their dirty laundry while trying to get out at their expense. And I think the persona of the femme fatale, who is the strong headed, extremely sexy character, kind of comes from media's obsession with Mata Hari. Now, Mata Hari was a known spy in the, I'd say she's a
First World
dancer,
War.
but she was also a spy. Yeah, from the First World War. This is Rohit's territory. Now he's just about to click into gear. Um,
No, no,
please.
let's not go down that tangent. But yeah, essentially, Mata Hari was this um, burlesque dancer of sorts. I don't know, just an entertainer who, I mean, if you look at her photos, in my opinion, she's not anything super special, but I guess she had abilities which let her get into, worm her way into inner circles. Turned out she was a spy the whole time, and I guess she also defied societal conceptions of women's agency.
Mhm.
Uh, Again, people alternately were either impressed by the extent of her agency or shocked by her transgressions, however you want to put it. I think it is more the latter sentiment that has led to the rise of femme fatale characters in cinema. Again, I don't want to step on Abhin's toes, but the origin, like this phenomenon of Matahari in the 1910s and rolling into the 20s, does sort of eventually lead to the rise of the femme fatale as a character uh, in the 20s and 30s. Again, we're going to
Mhm.
discuss the hard-boiled Pulp Fiction and how that led
Yeah.
to this sort of character. But the essence, you're right. The origin in essence comes from probably real life people like her.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where it began, and then it started. Like this character started having a life in, as Rohit mentioned, hard-boiled pulp fictions, right? Which are these little small stories about these detectives that were published in magazines, in these really cheap magazines back in the 30s, and that became a supremely popular character trope. And I think the 40s to the 50s is considered the golden age of cinema in Hollywood. And at the same time, it was also coincided with the rise of film noir. And I don't think there is a better film to represent this particular characteristic than Double Indemnity,
I was
starring
just
what's
going
the
to
first
say Fred
starring
McMurray
Humphrey
and
Bogart.
Barbara Stanwyck, right?
Exactly. And Barbara Stanwyck essentially is the prototype for what is to come
Yeah,
60, 70 years down the line, or some case 40 years down the line. But the thing was, when through this golden age of cinema and with the rise of film noir, also came the Hays Code, which was essentially a set of guidelines provided to basically movie studios about on what to avoid in terms of showing violence, nudity, as well as saying some sort of racial slurs. I think it came off the back of some pretty problematic depictions of people in the 20s, 20s and the 30s.
the interesting bit about the Hays Code is, like you rightly said, right? In the 20s and early 30s, the Hays Code, in fact, came into effect 1934 onwards. But the 20s, as we know, at least in the US, was a time of excess, right? Which is why it's called the Roaring Twenties, the time of excess, the
Mm.
time of debauchery, and this did sort of spill over onto the screen as well, right? Obviously, we know today that any new media format that comes out or is invented, it's among the first things that get adapted into this media format is usually some sort of porn, right? So
Mhm.
depicting, I mean, using a new medium to depict sex in some form is a tendency that's as old as time, right? From the time
Mhm.
the first Sumerians probably figured, you could. write stuff on clay and then bake it and it would remain. I'm sure there was
Yeah.
smut tablets that were making their way, right? So anyway, coming back, uh, I remember reading a few movies in the 20s, stuff like something like The Farmer's Daughter or stuff like that, where it is essentially softcore porn, whatever, posing as cinema, right? And
Mhm.
um, among the first kissing scenes, among the first times that a breast was shown on screen was in the 20s, right? And all said and done, America's history or roots lie in puritanical thought, right? Which is why they jumped onto this and made sure they tried to nip it in the bud, which is why the Hays Code came in. And I think it was there for a surprisingly long amount of time, almost, I
Yeah.
think, 30, 40 years, right?
68 was when it went off. I think 68 is when they officially like uh, you know had it disbanded. But I think by then, even by then, um, come the 50s, the film noir genre was dying because this is Hollywood's tendency to just oversaturate things, and it has stayed the same for nearly like 100 years at this point.
Yeah.
What Hollywood is capable of doing very well is it once it cracks onto a right formula film that just about gets everything right, you start to see clones or variations of it over a period of time, and that's what happened with the film noir genre. Like a bunch of them came together in quick succession. You kind of the audience's taste was saturated, and this also was a time where America was coming back from the Second World War, so they were trying to promote the ideal American family. So
Yeah.
I believe the Hollywood directive at the time was to focus more on women who were leading more domesticated lives. So if you look at the roles the Audrey Hepburns of the world were playing at the time, it was more homebodies as opposed to the mysterious brooding female character. So I think between the 50s to, let's say, mid the late 70s, I think there might have been a movie here or there that we may have missed, but for a large part, the genre remained fairly dominant. And I think come the 80s, and I read an article by this journalist called Ria Kapoor who kind of rather explored how and why these movies started to get made in the late 80s. Or rather in the early 80s. And she spoke about how this was coming off the back of the post feminism movement, which initially the feminism movement was more about equality and rights. And the post feminism movement was essentially about giving power to the women, saying, in spite of the infrastructure that's built around you to keep you down, your power is enough to overcome these obstacles. And it essentially began the whole girl boss or girl power narrative that we know well today. And I think at the same time, she also mentioned that uh, the pill, rather birth control pills, were a lot more popular. So people were having a lot more sex. And it was not so much of a taboo thing. The Hays Code had been disbanded about 12 years ago, so it wasn't really, people weren't afraid to see it on screen. And in the 70s, there was a big boom in porn. Like what happened was, if you've seen Boogie Nights and if you've read um, about that particular era, those were times where porn was shown in movie theaters. Like people would go to movie theaters to watch these films, and they almost had like a it was a separate industry by itself, but it was a pretty thriving industry, and it definitely influenced a shit ton of directors. Now I'm getting to couple of films in the early 80s that kind of kickstarted all of this. So the one that really kickstarted it was William Friedkin's Cruising, uh, where Al Pacino plays a cop investing a set of murders in gay nightclubs. I could be mistaken about the premise.
I think
The
all I know is
second,
that this dude goes to gay nightclubs. Yeah, that's all I know of
he's
the
investing a
movie.
series of, yeah. William Friedkin had a weird 70s.
Yeah,
Then,
exorcist.
yeah. And then you had Lawrence Kasdan's Body Heat. Now, Lawrence Kasdan had, I think, in my opinion, probably the best start to the 80s, to a decade that anyone has ever had. 1980, he wrote Empire Strikes Back. 1981, he wrote Raiders of the Lost Ark. 1981, he directed Body Heat, starring William Hurt and Kathleen Turner, and he sends Kathleen Turner into the stratosphere, right, with this film. And it's about a small town lawyer who it's a remake of Double Indemnity. Essentially, it's the same thing. It's Double Indemnity is about, an insurance salesman who meets this woman and falls in love with her, and she convinces him to kill her husband. Similarly, a same situation where there's a woman married to a really wealthy guy. She wants to get out of it. She entraps William Hurt's character, and William Hurt just can't keep his eyes off of her, so he just falls head over heels over this woman, and then just uh, things ensue. It makes for extremely titillating viewing, and Kathleen Turner is fucking amazing in this movie. If you have not seen it, I highly recommend you watch it.
Would you get me a paper towel or something? Dip it in some cold water.
Right away. I'll even wipe it off for you.
You don't want to lick it?
I haven't. But also a quick shout out to 1979's Hardcore, directed by Paul Schrader, starring George C. Scott. Uh, Although we're still in the 70s, already less than a decade in, there are already movies being made about the darker side of the porn industry, right? Of
Mhm.
course, if you watch the movie or you read the plot, there's a shit ton of sensationalism that's happening in hardcore, which is essentially the story about this guy, this what's the midwestern guy whose daughter runs away from their small town. I think he follows her to LA. She comes here wanting to be an actress, and eventually he finds out that she's been uh, subsumed by the porn industry, or whatever. She's been sucked into it, and the rest of the movie is him trying to uh, figure out where she is and
Hmm.
sort of get her out of it. It has maybe what I would consider a saccharine ending, where he's able to bring her out of it, and she's like, I didn't do it of my own volition, and she wants to get
Mhm.
better and stuff like that. Uh, so yeah, my point being, while there were movies like you are mentioning that took advantage of this wave, there was already that counter thought already sort of being out there that hey, there is a darker side to this, right? And
Yeah,
it's interesting how both these voices found their audience.
very intriguing given also how Brian De Palma, who I think we're going to talk about right now,
How can we
realized
not?
who realized he was like, I love Alfred Hitchcock and I love porn. How can I make the two together?
That's pretty much it. And I think with every subsequent movie that he sort of got away with it, Brian De Palma was just pushing the envelope, right? There is a point where it's like, I'm straight up shooting porn. If I get
If
pushback,
you
I'm going to, yeah, I'm just going to bring some story into it.
like, I don't know if you've seen Dress to Kill. Dress to Kill opens up with this 15-minute montage of a woman having a shower, and I'm just like, rather not montage, I'm saying a 15-minute like shot of a woman having a shower and water
Yeah.
dripping down her body, and
Dress to Kill is the epitome of Brian De Palma just wanting to shoot porn.
it actually is not, because you need to watch. So this was like hesitant Brian De Palma, where he's like, okay, I am breaking into this industry. Dress to Kill becomes a huge hit, culturally not aged the best. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Then he follows that up with Scarface, propels him into the into outside outside the earth at this point, and then he signs on a 3D picture with, I think, Paramount or Columbia, one of these two. I'll put up the studio on the screen. And the first in the series of films is a movie called Body Double, which is about
Sorry,
this
I meant
guy,
Body
which
Double,
is like,
not Dress to Kill. Body Double is the movie
yeah,
I meant. It's like a porn
yeah,
rare window.
exactly. I was just going to say that. He's like, rare window, so cool. How can I make this for today's sensibilities? So the movie is about this struggling actor who deals with claustrophobia. He gets kicked out of his movie. He goes home. His girlfriend is sleeping with somebody else, so he leaves that house. He has no place to stay. And then an actor friend of his tells him, "Hey, I'm house sitting for this really rich guy up in the hills. Why don't you go stay in his house?" And just FYI, if we have like a little telescope on the corner, and there's a woman across the street who dances naked every night for no reason, and it's a good. And if you're into like voyeurism, it's a great show for you. No charge.
I mean, who sells their place like that, right? Hey, come on
Yeah.
over. There's a lot of opportunities for you to be a creep. Does that convince you?
And he happily goes. So he's watching this guy, uh, and he's watching this woman dance in the night, and then there's a murder, and then Melanie Griffith shows up, and which was like her breakout role at the time. Body Double tanked. It didn't do too well, but it kind of started. It it has since developed like a cult classic following. It's up in Criterion's collection. It's a very well-renowned movie. The movie ends, and I probably about 95% of your viewers will not watch this. The movie ends with a set of boobs and blood.
Yeah.
Brian De Palma's like, how can I have boobs and blood in the same scene? And that is the final shot of the film.
How can I get the two together? I can just show it together. I am the
Yeah.
director here.
He's like, screw it. I was watching I was listening to the Rewatchables podcast that Kenneth does, and did a deep dive on this film. And apparently, there's a rumor going around that Brian De Palma hates is that he got a bunch of porn actresses to come and masturbate in front of him to test screen for the role. And he's like, that's absolute bullshit. That's not what happened. I did enlist the help of a porn actress to help Melanie Griffith. But besides that, all of this is fairly untrue. And the rewatchable guys are like, we're calling bullshit. This probably happened.
Yeah, it's totally plausible. But the I would say the Brian De Palmas of the world walked so that the indecent proposals and the basic
Fatal Attraction.
instincts of the world could fly, and Fatal Attraction, of course. I would say the peak era for these erotic thrillers was late 80s, early 90s. This is when at their apex, and people were really going to the races for it.
I think Fatal Attraction kind of started it. Like it was the whole, uh, the match that lit the bonfire situation, which is about Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas loved playing this character. He did it some three,
Yeah,
four
or
times.
or as our friend Nitin would say, Michael Dagadagalas. He always somehow found himself in these erotic thrillers, and most of the times he's like, "Oh, wait, you're going down on me. I don't know why this is
Well,
happening, but like, yeah, dude, sure.
sure, dude.
Everything just always happens to you, right? Cool.
He's like, yeah, stop rubbing it in our faces or in theirs.
Yeah, yeah,
Fatal Attraction is about stars Glenn Close and Michael Douglas, and it's about this married man who has a one night stand with a woman, and then he spurns her, and she goes absolutely crazy, and tries everything to get back at him. Indecent Proposal, I don't quite remember what's it about.
it's Demi Moore, Woody Harrelson, and Michael Douglas.
Hello, quick correction from the editing table. Michael Douglas is not an Indecent Proposal. It's Robert Redford. But Rohit will continue to refer to him as Michael Douglas for a few minutes. Apologies.
I'm just laughing because I just remembered the Hindi remake of it, which is completely a whole other world. But anyways,
What
the
is
story
it?
is Judai, bro. I'll come
Oh,
to that.
are you? Oh, wow. Okay, fine.
So the story of Indecent Proposal is Michael Dagadagalas sees Demi Moore at some. I'm just gonna call him Michael Dagadagalas for the rest of the podcast. Sees Demi Moore. Uh, I think somewhere around some function, and he's immediately rock hard for her. So goes to Woody Harrelson and says, "I'll pay you, I think, $1 million to spend a night with your wife." And the couple wrestles with it. I think eventually they do spend the night together, but I don't remember the rest of the story. Woody Harrelson obviously is wrecked by the doubts of what happened in that night, and Demi Moore is
Mm,
like, "How can you question me, right? How can you
yeah.
question my fidelity? But I won't." And she's also like, "The fact that you question me means I won't tell you what happened that night, right?" And Dagadagalas is like, "Of course, bro, I lived up to my name."
Uh,
And all of these doubts sort of pull apart at the marriage. And that's what I
yeah.
remember the theme of the movie to be. I don't remember the exact specifics.
Judai.
So
But okay.
the Indian remake of this, because it's India and you can't have plotline around this one night, is Judai, where uh, and they've gender Hey, they've also sort of reversed the genders here. How progressive of us, right?
Uh,
How Urmila Matondkar plays the character of Michael Dagadagalas. Uh, Anil Kapoor is Demi Moore, which, and and Sridevi plays Woody Harrelson, where
amazing, amazing.
Urmila Matondkar goes and says, "I'll pay you whatever it's 1 crore rupees to be able to marry. If you divorce Anil Kapoor, I'll marry him and I'll pay you 1 crore or something like that." Eventually, he ends up marrying both because fuck the Indian law code, right? You polygamy is chill if you're all okay with it. Yes.
We're fine. I will make it work. So
So yeah, that is
that's what Indecent.
uh, indecent proposal in Bollywood was Judai. Sorry for that sidetrack,
Okay.
but yes, indecent proposal, fatal attraction, Glenn Close, more like Glenn too close. Most of the time.
But I really
Uh,
think the peak is 1992.
yes,
Once again, starring
yes,
Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone and Paul Verhoeven's Basic Instinct. I I watched recently again with a friend, and I was like, "This movie will never be made today." It's the first fight. It opens up with this shot of this couple having sex, and then it's
yeah.
like, and then there's that famous interrogation sequence where with Sharon Stone and Michael Douglas, where they're questioning her about the murder, and she crosses her legs. And at the time, she was vehemently against that scene, and but Paul Verhoeven convinced her to do it. And it's like a blink and miss thing, right? Like you see it, and but apparently it was the most paused moment on video rental ever. There's like some bit of trivia behind that,
I'm
and
sure.
it became one of the most infamous movie scenes of all time.
Again, I'm sure there's a lot more um, erotic thrillers that Michael Dagadagalas has been a part of. I'm sure we're
There's one.
missing out
I have
on
one
some.
more to follow up. I think there's one more in the year '94 that he was also in.
With Demi Moore
Uh,
again, where I'm
yes,
forgetting the name.
Disclosure.
Disclosure, yes. But yes,
Anyway, uh,
early 90s led into, I mean, for the late 90s followed the early 90s, and I guess you could start seeing. Yes, there were a few more hurrahs uh, there. The Last Reduction and Eyes Wide Shut, which I would say is among the better movies in general, right? The fact that it's an erotic thriller, the eroticism is probably more incidental to this movie than any other.
on
Uh,
100%.
yeah,
I,
so I would say one
I
of the
I
better ones.
think I am not even going. I think out of all the movies that we discussed on this episode, Eyes Wide Shut will probably has the best case of having a single episode dedicated to it. Purely
Hmm.
because there's so much to unpack. Like
Yeah,
it's Stanley Kubrick's last film. There's so many. There's the weird cultural relevance it kind of has today. There's the Harvey Keitel story, which I really want to talk about. So there's like
a lot of BTS stuff also in
a
general.
lot of BTS stuff and and obviously it's a film that again Tom and Nicole, Tom Cruise in a movie like when you never think he'd be in a movie like this today. It being a
Yeah,
Christmas movie as well. So there's that. And Nicole Kidman up to this point had kind of started doing a bunch of roles, these femme fatale roles. She's in Malice with Alec Baldwin and Bill Pullman, a movie I watched last night. Apparently, it is the only Aaron Sorkin film to have never been nominated for an Oscar.
wow,
And every other
that's
Aaron Sorkin written movie has been nominated for an Oscar in some capacity or the other. Tobin Bell is there randomly. I was like, the hell is this movie? But he's
hmm.
just Gwyneth Paltrow in a blink and miss role. Like it's filled with a bunch of really famous characters. But these were Malice to a certain degree was kind of not. I'd say it wasn't a commercial. It did really well with the VHS market, which I think is a point you should have mentioned. By now, I think by the mid 80s, VHS was everywhere. The porn industry had kind of tanked to it because they realized it was cheaper to turn over. And these movies, the reason why these movies were so successful were because they were cheap to make. They didn't cost a lot. They were easy to shoot. They would essentially wrap the entire thing up in, let's say, a month or a couple of months at the most, and have them rolled out in the theaters and make a shit ton of money. And then come the DVD, sorry, the VCD, the video disc, laser discs aspect of of the release, they would make a chunk of money there as well, like Malice did. But it also kind of hampered the industry because a lot of these films started going straight to video because they just people were just chasing the high of the home release market. And as a result, you had films in theaters, which was inundating audiences. You had the home releases, which was inundating audiences. Uh, and it got to a point where, much like any oversaturated genre, like we have with superheroes right now, people just got sick of it. And come the mid 2000s, sensibilities had shifted. People wanted more grounded, gritty storytelling. The genre slowly started to take a bit of a dive. I'm sure there are some cases here and there, but by, let's say, by 99 2000, it was firmly in the backseat for some time,
Yeah,
which kind of was weird because it coincided with the rise of the genre in Bollywood at the time.
which is surprising, and I mean, I wouldn't say surprising. I mean, if you dissect it uh, sufficiently, there are always reasons for it. I mean, the most obvious correlation I can draw is with liberalization and our economy opening up in the early 90s. And not just the economy, right? You had foreign brands, foreign movies. Access to that was a lot more democratized, a lot more eyeballs for the sort of movies that were being made in the early 90s in Hollywood. And coincidentally, erotic thrillers were a big chunk of those movies. I'm sure a lot of the directors, like the Mohit Suris of the world, who are the peddlers of Turkey films in India, probably their formative movie watching years also coincided with this decade, right? So I'm sure it
Hmm.
knowingly, unknowingly informed a lot of their sensibilities, which is why when they were in positions of power where they could direct and decide what their movies would say, this the visual language or just the these plot lines and these whole tropes of femme fatales and gullible but could have, well-meaning, well-intentioned protagonists found their way into Bollywood movies as well. Which is why in the early 2000s you start seeing the rise of the erotic thriller in Bollywood, of them chief being
The number one, I think, the number, I wouldn't even call this an erotic thriller as much as it's a supernatural erotic film, erotic supernatural film. That is 2002's Raz. I
yeah.
think if you were to draw a line between when it started, I'd say Raz, starring Dino Moria and Bipasha Basu. I really think it came down to, and this is like lived experiences. I remember when Bipasha Basu burst into the scene. She was in this. Ajnabi was her debut. I think she debuted with Ajnabi. I could be mistaken, but she'd kind of been typecast as the sex symbol, like this new face, the
Yeah.
new representation of the female actress in Bollywood, right? And she was one of the first few leading faces at the time. And it's not Raz is not about a femme fatale character. Essentially, it's a retelling of the 2001 film What Lies Beneath, starring
What lies
Michelle
beneath.
Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford. But it was a film that dealt with similar themes. And then a year later, she debuts with her then, I mean, rather, she makes a film with her boyfriend who debuts. It's called Jism, which is ironically a remake of Body Heat, which in turn is a remake of Double Indemnity. So that's essentially the premise of the film that's been slightly twisted around. And I think a large of part of this was down to the Bhatt camp. Like, I think Raz is a Vikram Bhatt directed film. And I think Jism also comes from the same camp. I believe the director is somebody else. I forget his name. But post Ghulam, which was 1997, 19, I think,
Yeah,
the
97,
Butt
98.
Camp, yeah, the Butt Camp moved into this genre of films where they would just realize we'll just start making these cheap films on the go.
Yeah. We
Sex
have
in
the
Bollywood,
insatiable loins of Vikram Bhatt to thank for the genre in India.
I think this, I don't know, I know this film was not on any of the lists that I looked up, but Kasoor with Aftab and Lisa Ray,
And Lisare, yeah.
yeah, also kind of falls in this little bracket of films. That's all well and
And
good. Then
coincidentally, this is around the time when you and I were also hitting puberty. It's just this perfect storm of Everything.
Everything 2003, 2004. Just like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah,
And
crazy.
I remember 2003 because Bipasha Basu was kind of the rage, and not far behind her coattails is this woman called Malaka Sherawat who comes in. Reena
Mallika
Lamba, for those of you, Mallika Sherawat. Reena Lamba, for those of you who don't know her original name, and she just starts. She's like, "Screw it, I'll kiss my heroes on screen." And at the same time, also comes a hero that says, "Screw it, I'll kiss my heroines on screen." I don't understand this taboo. That's Imran Hashmi, and with in between those two, they kickstarted a whole genre of films. I think Imran Hashmi's career he started with Footpath, where he was like a side character, but he generally had like
Yeah,
a lot of goodwill come out of that role, and then he started getting leading roles because he's like, "Screw it, I'll kiss my heroines." Zeher comes to mind, Aksar comes to mind, Murder, of course. Murder is the biggest one, which
yeah.
is a remake of 2002's Unfaithful, the one offshoot of the erotic thriller genre that somehow survived the 90s slump. He just became a household name for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, literally when they say, right, men want to be him, women want him, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It is. There's also Disclosure that was remade in Hindi as Aitraaz,
Of course,
uh,
yes.
which is, I would say, borderline erotic thriller because it still has like respectable actors in Kareena Kapoor, Priyanka Chopra, who like has taken risks in this film. Kudos to her, right? It's
Uh-huh.
a very like okay, she
If
does
if
put
the
herself.
tabloids were to be believed, she was taking risks in real life as well, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, yeah, that's sure. And
Mm.
Akshay Kumar to is a dream scenario.
Yeah, no, Akshay Kumar got into a
As
lot of trouble with this movie. Like generally, I think this is one of
I'm
the
sure,
few
I'm
times.
sure.
Yeah,
Again, like Michael Dagadagalas, I'm going to use the name that Bolly Blinds and Gossip has given Akshay Kumar, which is Akshay Kumar. So, but yeah, all of these movies, right? Some of them remakes, like you said, of Unfaithful, of Disclosure. Actually, all of them have remakes. Most of them,
they're all
the,
remakes.
the good ones, the ones that we remember, are all remakes. Because I guess,
Murder is a remake.
yeah, Jism is a
Um,
remake. Raz is a remake.
of course, yeah.
Uh, Aitraaz is a remake. I
Hmm.
guess Indian directors couldn't be trusted to helm original erotic thrillers because at that point it's just going to devolve into like outright porn, I guess. They're like, this is the story. Don't. These are your
Yeah.
guardrails. Stay in your limits. Make the film go.
I think also this era now it's just come to me. This era was responsible for the death of indie pop because up until this point, like the mid 2000s, indie pop was a scene. Like you had artists releasing music, and then
Yeah.
came this genre of film. And then if you notice, like all of these, they were not just ripping off film plots; they were ripping off songs from other like popular industry, saying, "Hey, who cares? Nobody listened to them." Chief among them being Preetham and Anu
Pritam,
Malik.
Pritam. Anu Malik has been doing this for ages. Pritam
Hmm.
was a lot more like just blasé about it or whatever. He uses in your face. He'll rip off very famous songs. Anu Malik will go rip off
Exactly.
Israeli national anthem, where you're like, sure, you ripped off, but pre-internet you found the Israeli national anthem like Mera Mulk, Mera Desh, Mera Ye Watan. This is my music. This is the tune for this song. Respect, bro. You've done the research. You earned it, right? Pritam will
Exactly.
go rip off like some fucking ultra famous song. He'll just be like, "This is mine now. Deal with
Yeah, I
it."
think I remember. I remember. I watched this movie called. What is the movie with Tushar Kapoor and Kareena Kapoor? Wah
आप
Kya Love
मुझे अच्छे
Story hai.
लग. Oh, okay.
No, no, that's Hrithik Roshan and Amisha Patel.
Oh yeah.
So this
That's
is
nice.
Wah Kya Love Story, the one with the It's Rocking song.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, there's a guy in that movie who plays like the second love interest. He he they essentially ripped off Bebo, which was like a 2005 hit by the Black Eyed Peas. It's literally the exact same song. They've ripped them off, and this movie came out in 2006. So it's just like, yeah, shameless, Preetham, absolutely shameless. But what this also did at the time was it served as this still staying on music, right? And music was a big part of how these movies made money, because
Yeah.
story, skin, um, music is kind of what got people coming into movie theaters at the time. We were in the digital age, but not as much as it is now. And it gave rise to the likes of Atif Aslam, who basically quit Jal a year into his band Jal, a year into their existence, and said, "Fuck it, I'm going solo." And then there was Kunal Ganjanwala, who kind of like took off as well. And the most everlasting singer that kind of has stayed the test of time, for good or bad, is Himesh Reshammiya. Himesh kind of cut his teeth on the back of these movies, and
Yeah.
he
Ashik Banaya Apne. So it all
yeah,
started
I
from
don't
that
think it's an error.
shit.
I don't think it's a. But he was
No, no,
doing
no.
music before that
Dude,
as well. Huh?
he was doing music before that. Ashik Banaya
Hmm.
Apne is the first time he sang on a movie
Yeah.
soundtrack.
Hello again. This wasn't the first time he sang. He'd been singing for a bunch of movies. And as a matter of fact, he even sang in Zahir, the clip that's in this video. Anyway, bye.
Mm.
That song became a hit, and then
Mm. Your life
humanity went
changed
to
forever.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have me sitting in the movie theater watching Badass Ravi Kumar. There's a
You
whole of
went to
that's
the theater to watch Badass Ravi Kumar.
bro. If there is a place, if you ever have to watch Badass Ravi Kumar, it's in a movie theater. The whole theater was dancing. I have After
I'm
Endgame, I have
sure.
not seen a movie. Yeah, you
If
see
I'm
this
not,
kind of
I don't recall the numbers, but it's ironically become a hit. No, like people
yeah.
were
It's
memeing it
ironically
to, yeah,
yeah. People have memed it to success. So
amazing.
yeah, so it's whatever.
That's the
So there's
exact
that.
opposite of the lesson Himesh is going to take from this. He's like, yeah, I always knew I was a superstar. Time to make 10 more of these.
That's a discussion for a whole other episode. But that's kind of uh, what happened to the genre. And again, like we can't have good things. They oversaturated the market with the Indian films as well. And I think by 2011, 12, your hate stories were around, and
Yeah,
these were just bad movies. I think Love, Sex, Dhokha was probably a good representation of it at the time, because it deals with voyeurism, it dealt with the genre in general, and it was a bit of a sleeper hit, directed by Dibaka Banerjee. But besides that, you can't really point out any sort of good original films to have come out of that era. And I think come the like late 2000s and early 2010s, people started shifting towards a more conservative approach. Rather, all the actresses who wanted to be considered mainstream started staying away from this particular genre of film. And I
yeah.
think
The other
for a
thing
couple
that
of
did
years,
happen was a decade or so ago, there was a little bit of revival of interest in the genre because Sunny Leone came on to Big Boss
I
and
was just coming up to it. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So that whole thing happened. There was a renewed focus on I don't know what to call it. It's porn adjacent, right? Although she was a pornographic actress, she was trying to, and as is her right, she was trying to like get away from that world, rebuild an image. I mean, a new image for her, but also she was smart to play on the image she came in with, right? You can't just, it's hard to do a clean break and a fresh start. Over the following years, she has sort of been successful where she's not as known, she's not known as much as an actress as much, but she's a
Mhm.
successful businessman, business person, producer. She sort of has carved a way for her. But coming back, those few years when she came into the larger Indian limelight or whatever spotlight, and again the whole spate of very bad erotic thrillers, if you want to call them, they're not even thrillers per se, your Ragini
Yeah, they're just
MMSs and your hate
it's
stories.
just slop. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just slop that they repurposed, and it it kind of died. And I think with the nation going more conservative again, it kind of the genre just kind of fizzled away. And now the the femme fatale character, probably the one that exists in Indian cinema right now to a certain degree, is Tabu. I think the one that has played it the most recently
yeah,
in Andhadhun, where
yeah.
which kind of plays in the to that similar trope. Married woman tries to get guy to do her dirty laundry. So
And to
that
nobody's
that
surprise,
was
right? Sriram Raghavan loves the genre, so
Yeah, Sherawat absolutely loves the genre. Even with what you call it, wouldn't call it an erotic thriller, Merry Christmas, but same proper. No, he loves a good noir story. Is how I put it.
Like you said, without I don't want to call names, but last decade or so, the direction society has been taking, and as a result, the sort of movies that are coming out, the sort of movies that are making money, the sort of movies that are drawing audiences to theaters, it feels like the only hard on you can have nowadays is for patriotism, right? So
Yeah, pretty much.
yeah,
Like it's pretty much. It's depressing. But the genre is not completely dead. I mean, there still exists some sort of offshoots that have interspersed accord like over the last decade or so in and across world cinema. I'd say uh, in Hollywood, I think they brought it back recently in a movie called Deep Waters, which was not very good. I mean, it's okay. It's sustainable fare, starring Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. Not as great. I'd say the modern representation of this movie, ironically, given this podcast, is 2014's Gone Girl.
oh my god, you had to bring it back to Gone
I
Girl.
mean, come on, just think about it.
It's not an erotic thriller. Come on, it's not an erotic thriller. It is a thriller. I mean, the eroticism exists.
Uh,
I'm not going to say no,
huh.
but it's not as central to the plot. Uh,
You're
it's not
right. I
central
mean,
enough
it
to the
is.
plot for it to be considered classified as an erotic thriller. And come on, I don't want to
Hmm.
read the sentence that David Fincher has directed an erotic thriller. That's doing a disservice to the man. There's
Okay.
roughly about as much sex in Gone Girl as in Fight Club, maybe. Would you
Yeah,
call
more or
Fight
less.
Club in there? Yeah, it's not. That's not fair.
But it's not. It's not. Fight Club is not. It's not based around the
Um,
premises. It's like
um,
a very
I get it. I get it.
yeah.
She's a femme fatale, yes, but it's not an
Huh.
erotic thriller. I think
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
a
right way
noir.
to
I
put
think yeah, it's like probably a noir, like a standard noir, a
it. Yeah.
neo noir is how I put it.
Yes.
Uh, and other, which I think definitely falls under the erotic thriller category, is 2016's The Handmaiden, directed by Park Chan Wook. It's a Korean film, and it's about this woman who's a con artist set in the late 19th century, who is sent to this palace to take care of a princess. And the idea is the guy who sends her is like, I need you to get close enough to her and basically swindle all her money. But those two end up falling in love, and a relationship blossoms, and it just turns the entire film's premise on its head. If you have not seen it, I won't spoil it for you. You definitely should watch it. There's an entire sequence involving an octopus, which is it's pure Park Chan Wook. It's fucking crazy. So go definitely go check it out. That I think is probably the closest a good film has come in the last decade or so. But I may be missing something, clearly something very obvious or something a little obscure. If I'm missing
Yeah.
it, please let me know. I'd love to know what suggestions you have. Yeah, anything more to add, or we can wrap it up here?
Yeah. I think
Hmm.
your very extensive message of all your prep pretty much covered it all. I tried to chip in wherever I could, but I think we've covered most of the angles you had in mind. But yeah, like you
Brian,
said,
your
if
farmer
we've
would be
missed
proud.
any movies, people would you want to recommend always. I don't know how to. I'm not going to say anymore. Go in this
Yes,
future.
please. I mean, if you've seen okay, recommendations from my end. If you are new to this genre and you have not watched any of these films, here's where you start. Start with 1981's Body Heat. Stars William Hurt and Kathleen Turner. Really interesting story. Fucking hot movie. Definitely check it out. Second, watch Body Double. It's a bit weird. The ending is a bit strange, but you get used to it. Actually, no, make that the third film you watch. The second film you watch is Basic Instinct, which I think is the perfect encapsulation of the genre as itself. The Last Seduction, in my opinion, is a phenomenal film, let alone an erotic thriller, and it has one of the most interesting female protagonists you'll see in a film. So definitely worth checking that out. Um, the other one that, and of course, the other two that stand out are, I liked Malice. From what I saw, I really was a fan of the writing. It's a pretty run by the mill story. I mean, you can see the the twist coming from a mile away, but still makes for highly entertaining viewing, which is something that could be said of Aaron Sorkin's writing. And of course, you definitely have to check out Fatal Attraction, the movie that kickstarted this entire genre.
Yeah, I think that's a solid set of recommendations. The only thing I have to add on top of that is if you guys are watching these movies, just space it out or you'll start chasing.
So, God, Rohit, I'm ending the episode. If you've come this far, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It does a lot for the channel. We'll catch you in the next episode. Take care, fucking jackass. Bye.
Bye.